London, 1970. The fog didn't roll in. It seemed to bleed up from the cobblestones, clinging to the wrought iron gates of Highgate Cemetery like a shroud. Inside the labyrinth of Victorian Gothic architecture, ivy-strangled angels and marble crypts stared blindly into the damp gloom. David didn't want to be here. He was 22, pragmatic, and heavily regretting letting his girlfriend, Sandra, drag him into the debate that was sweeping the British tabloids. For months, the Daily Mirror and the Hampstead and Highgate Express had run hysterical headlines about vampires stalking the sprawling graveyard. Sightings of tall, grey-faced figures with hypnotic red eyes, mutilated foxes drained of blood, and cold spots in the air. The police found another one near the catacombs, Sandra whispered, her breath pluming white in the chill air. She held a heavy-duty flashlight, its beam cutting erratic swathes through the dark. Foxes, Sandra, or runaway mental patients, David muttered, pulling his wool coat tight. He was thinking of the missing persons posters stapled to telephone poles just outside the cemetery gates. People vanish in London all the time, but the disappearance of 19-year-old Brenda Woods 3 nights ago felt different. The police logs mentioned she had been spotted walking near Swains Lane just before midnight, muttering about a tall man in a tall hat who was waiting for her. She was never seen again. Suddenly, Sandra stopped. "Did you hear that?" David strained his ears. Above the rustle of dead leaves, there was a sound, not a footstep. It was a rhythmic, wet scraping, like something heavy being dragged across stone. "Let's go," David said, his voice dropping an octave. "Wait, look." Sandra pointed her flashlight beam toward the Circle of Lebanon, a majestic ring of vaults surrounding a massive, ancient cedar tree. In the center of the circle stood an Egyptian-style avenue of tombs, their heavy bronze doors sealed tight. Except for one. The door hung slightly ajar, casting a wedge of absolute blackness onto the gravel. Against his better judgment, David stepped forward. "Hello," he called out. His voice sounded pathetic, swallowed instantly by the oppressive silence of the dead. As they neared the vault, the ambient temperature plummeted. It wasn't just cold, it was the bone, deep chill of a meat locker. A sickening metallic stench drifted out from the dark interior. Copper and stale dust. Sandra gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Protruding from the darkness of the tomb threshold was a pair of platform-soled boots. David's stomach plummeted. He knew those boots. Brenda Woods had worn them the last time he'd seen her, at the local pub. Brenda. David choked out, stepping past the threshold. He swept his own small flashlight into the crypt. The beam illuminated damp stone walls, dripping with condensation. Piled in the corner were the shredded remains of several foxes. And then David saw her. Brenda lay crumpled against the rear wall, but she wasn't breathing, and her skin bore a horrifying waxy grey pallor. 2 distinct punctures marred the side of her pale neck before David could scream. The air behind him shifted. A shadow, impossibly tall and unnaturally thin, detached itself from the stone archway of the vault. David whirled around, standing in the doorway, blocking their only escape, was a man. He wore a Victorian frock coat and a wide-brimmed felt hat that cast his upper face in deep shadow. But it was his face that paralyzed David with a primal, suffocating terror. The skin was stretched taut over high cheekbones, translucent as parchment, and beneath the brim of the hat, 2 eyes burned with a cold, hypnotic crimson light, not glowing, but reflecting the dim yellow of the flashlight like a nocturnal animal's. The creature didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply loomed, radiating an ancient, predatory hunger that seemed to freeze the blood in David's veins. A strangled shriek tore from Sandra's throat, breaking the spell. "Run." David grabbed her arm, shoving past the edge of the doorway, into the open night air. They didn't look back. They scrambled over fallen headstones, tearing their coats on thorny briars, crashing blindly through the fog until they slammed through the cemetery gates and collapsed onto the pavement of Swains Lane. Gasping for air, David looked back up at the iron spikes of Highgate. The fog had swallowed the cemetery once more, but high above the graves, silhouetted against the pale London moon, a tall, slender shadow stood atop the gatehouse wall, watching them vanish into the dark. Brenda Woods was never found by Scotland Yard. Neither was 19-year-old Thomas Taylor, who went missing the following week, and the tabloid frenzy only grew, whispering of a modern aristocracy of the undead, sleeping by day in the grand Victorian sepulchres of North London, waiting for the dusk to claim their next quiet walk in the fog.